everyone. I want to talk a little bit about chord substitution. So everything I played there was over an E major groove or an E7 groove. And chord substitution is something that can really spice up your playing, can make it sound quite sophisticated, and it's not really that hard to do. There's a couple of really simple sort of tricks you can do to slip in some interesting chords, and that's what I want to talk about today. So essentially what I've got is, if you're playing, say, a blues in the key of E, something that you can do that doesn't require a lot of sort of theoretical knowledge is, if you're playing over, let's say, for example, the one chord, which is going to be E in this example here, you can play a 5 minor chord and it's going to be totally cool. So that means playing a B minor chord would be super hip. So basically what you've got, E major, the 5 minor would be B minor. A B minor here is essentially like playing an E9 chord. It's got no third, right? So it gives you this kind of sus sound, because the 7th of a B minor chord is an A, and that resolves down to the 3rd of E. So you get this great sus sort of. So that's a B minor 9 right there. I've got my index finger across the 7th fret, and I have my pinky up here on the 9th fret of the high E string. It's in this state of suspension because it wants to resolve down to this. And you can have a lot of fun with that, playing around with the suspensions. So you could play like your standard B minor bar chord, but it sounds cooler when you use different voicings. For example, if you play this voicing up here, if you want to get a real western swing sound, you can play 6th fret G, 5th fret B, and 4th fret high E. That's an E6 chord. It's also the same as a C sharp minor chord. Now if you slide that down a tone, you now get a B minor chord. But remember, B minor is sort of like an E9 with a suspension in there, so it works. So you can get that. You don't have to resolve it. I mean, at some point it's kind of cool to resolve it, but you can draw it out for as long as possible. The same can be said for the flat 7 degree, which is D in the key of E. You can build a major 7 chord off that. And because D and B minor are relative chords, meaning B minor is the relative minor of D major, you are again essentially playing the same chord. So the theory all checks out on that stuff. So if I played a D major 7, which would be this, I've got 12 on the D, 11 on the G, 10 on the B, and indexes on 9 on the high E string. With an E in the bass, that D major 7 chord is now giving us like a sus 13 sort of sound, which is really cool. But you can move different triads around, so you can go from D to E to then the next inversion. And that's for those of you familiar with the song Milestones by Miles Davis. That's essentially what it's doing. What we're looking at here is modal comping. I'm not really a proponent of thinking modally. I find it sort of confusing, and it's an unnecessarily mental load when you're already doing something that's hard enough. But it is essentially what we're doing here. We're looking at modal playing, and it gives you a pretty cool, slightly free sort of sound. It's not tonal, for example, you know? And then when you chuck in something that is like your standard blues scale or mixolydian, it's pretty hip. So the things that I was looking at there, this is another really cool voicing. If you play a D major 9, so that's 5th fret A, 4th fret D, then you can have 4th fret G as well, and then 5th fret on the B string. That gives you like a D6 9, but you can hammer up to this. Danny Gatton does that in the song Sky King. He goes. That's a pretty hip groove to play over a blues in E. But say, for example, I was playing in a mellow shuffle And I didn't want it to sound like your standard Stevie Ray Vaughan sort of blues. So if the bass player is doing something like I might sustain one of these chords, or I might do something kind of rhythmic. So if I was going to sustain, I might go. Now I'm playing an A. That would be the first 4 bars like that. So the other thing that you can do when you're playing this kind of stuff is you can build up the tension by staying on something, and you can do like a more rhythmic thing by going. So when you get to the 4 chord, there's this great release, because you it's almost like holding your thumb over a hose while the water pressure is building up, and then when you get to the 4 chord. This can be done over the 4 chord. So remember, when you go to a 4 chord, when we're playing this kind of blues or jazz or country music, we treat every new chord as if we're like migrating to a new key center, okay? So now we're technically in the land of A major, and so everything gets rearranged. A is now the 1, so the flat 7 of A would be G major, and the 5 of A would be E minor. So I can play all the same licks I was doing, but they're now in the key of A. When I go back to E, it rearranges. When I get to B, which is the 5 of E in the original key that we were in, I tend not to do any of this stuff because we've got a bit vague so far with, superimposing chords over bass lines that, are pretty strong. It's like this is an E and I'm playing a B minor or I'm playing a D. When we get to the 5 chord is the one thing that is going to let everybody know what key we are actually in. It's like the big reveal at the end of a blues. And I don't really like to mess around with that. It means I can get pretty weird and pretty vague with all the other chords I usually play. But when I get to that 5, I like to try and keep it pretty straightforward. I'll either play a B7 chord, although that's often a little boring. So what I'll tend to do is I'll play some kind of an altered chord. I might play a B7 sharp 9, the Hendrix chord. I can play a flat 9. I can play inversions of the flat 9, diminished stuff, and then you can get into proper altered voicings. I'll do another lesson on that, and then I will do a lesson on how you play over those chords. But this is just something cool that you can sort of play in your sort of blueses that you're doing. So if you had that same groove, you could do something that's a little bit more rhythmic of. Now I've gone to the A. So that would be a cool way of playing the first 4 bars. Another really cool thing you could do, I'll give you another example, would be something like this. That's the A, chord 4. So it requires like a little bit of theoretical knowledge, not a huge amount, but I wouldn't get too caught up into the stuff I explained. I gave you all of the theory behind it. I'm not thinking about that stuff when I'm playing. I'm hearing melodies. The top line of what I play is the melody that I'm hearing. And then I harmonize chords underneath that. So forth. And I know that in its sort of simplest form, if I'm playing a chord, I can play the minor 5 over that chord, that major chord, and it will sound cool. It will give me that sus, sort of jazzy western swing sound. So have fun with this video. If you got any questions, leave a comment. I'll do some more stuff on blues, jazz, comping. Please share this around if you think anyone's going to benefit from it, and give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of those things. And I'll catch you around for another lesson of jazz blues comping.